Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to be digital archaeologists, digging into the invisible operating system that runs our modern world. It's a source code written thousands of years ago, but it shapes everything from our legal systems to our own sense of self. So let's crack it open.
So let's start with a really big question. We talk about human rights, we believe in scientific inquiry, we're obsessed with the idea of progress. These all feel so modern, so ours, right? But what if I told you the intellectual DNA for all of these core beliefs was written thousands of years ago, born from a collision between two radically different ways of seeing reality?
To get to the bottom of this, we've got to talk about this concept of a worldview. Now, just think of it like this. It's the foundational software. The mental map that every single one of us uses to navigate the world. It's not just a bunch of opinions. It's the deep-down structure that filters everything we see and tells us what's real, what's true, and what actually matters.
So where did our particular source code come from? Well, the first foundational pillar of Western thought we can call Jerusalem. This represents the Hebraic worldview. And to really get a grip on our modern world, you have to understand the incredible revolution that started right here.
You see, this wasn't some slow, gradual shift. No way. Scholars actually call it the Great Break, a revolutionary, you might even say violent, rupture from all the prevailing ideas of its time in places like Mesopotamia and Egypt. It completely rewired how people thought about God, humanity, and even time itself.
And just look at one of the biggest changes this break introduced, the very idea of time. I mean, think about it. Most ancient cultures saw time as a circle, right? An endless repeating cycle of seasons and events. The world was kind of stuck in a loop. The Hebraic view took that circle and straightened it out into a line. All of a sudden, history had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It wasn't a trap anymore. It was a journey. And that single idea, linear time, is the absolute bedrock for our modern concept of progress. Without it, progress is literally unthinkable.
And that's not all. The Hebraic worldview also introduced another incredibly transformative concept, the Imago Dei. This is the idea that every single human being is created in the image of God. Now, that might sound familiar to us today, but in the ancient world, that was an absolutely explosive, world-changing idea. And this slide right here shows you exactly why. In the surrounding cultures, humans were basically an afterthought. They were created as divine slave labor to do the grunt work the gods didn't feel like doing. Only the big guy, the king or the pharaoh, was seen as a divine representative on earth. The Hebraic model completely flipped that on its head. It democratized dignity. It said, no, every single person, the farmer, the baker, the woman, the child, has inherent, inalienable worth. This right here, this is the theological seed from which our modern idea of universal human rights would one day sprout.
Okay, so let's move on to our second pillar, Athens. This is the home of the Hellenic or Greek worldview. And if Jerusalem gave us a new moral and historical framework, Athens gave us a brand new, incredibly powerful operating system for how to actually think about the world.
The huge Greek breakthrough was a shift from what they called mythos to logos. They pioneered a move away from just explaining the world through stories about angry or happy gods, and toward understanding it through the power of pure, unassisted human reason. They started asking not just who did this, but how does this work and why does it work this way?
And all of this was based on a pretty wild assumption for the time, that the universe isn't just random chaos. They believed it's an ordered, intelligible place that's governed by discoverable laws, that the world makes sense, and that our human minds have the capacity to figure it out. That belief is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for all of science. You just can't have science without it.
And to explore this ordered universe, the Greeks developed some incredible intellectual tools. The most famous one, of course, is the Socratic method, a systematic way of asking really sharp, probing questions to challenge your own assumptions and dig down to deeper truths. I mean, this is a technique so powerful that it's still a cornerstone of law, education, and critical thinking today.
So, for centuries, you've got these two immensely powerful, but let's be honest, very different worldviews developing almost in separate lanes. You have Jerusalem's focus on faith, history, and revelation, and you have Athens' focus on logic and human reason. So the big question is, how on earth did they ever come together to form the foundation of the modern world?
Well, it definitely wasn't a single event. It was a long, messy, and complex convergence that happened over centuries.
It starts way back in the 1st century with thinkers like Philo of Alexandria, who tried to blend Jewish scripture with Greek philosophy. It keeps going with early church fathers like Augustine, who is a huge fan of Plato. And it really hits its peak in the 13th century with the absolutely monumental work of Thomas Aquinas.
The crucial idea that powered this whole grand synthesis really came from Aquinas. He argued that faith and reason, they're not enemies. They aren't opposing forces. Instead, they're two different but equally valid paths to the exact same ultimate truth. Why? Because they both come from the same divine source. So you could study the natural world using Aristotle's logic, and you could study scripture through divine revelation, and guess what? They wouldn't contradict each other. This idea created the intellectual launchpad for the next 800 years of Western thought.
Okay, so how does this ancient synthesis actually build the world we're all living in today? Because I promise you, this is not just some dusty academic history lesson. Understanding this merger is absolutely essential to understanding the core values that define our lives, right here, right now. Just think about it. Our most cherished modern ideas are the direct descendants of this unique fusion. The idea of universal human rights, that's the secularized child of the Hebrew Imago Dei. The scientific method, it was born from the Greek belief in a rational universe, but it was combined with the Hebrew idea of a single, consistent creator who made a world with predictable laws. Even the idea of the rule of law, that a king isn't above it all, comes from the Hebrew covenant, which was then structured by Greek and Roman legal systems. And our constant drive for social progress, that's fueled by that linear view of history that started back in Jerusalem. And that leaves us with one final thought. This synthesis was never a perfect, peaceful blend. The tension between Athens and Jerusalem, between reason and revelation, between science and morality, the individual and the community, that isn't just some story from the past. It is the living, breathing, ongoing conversation that fuels our most urgent modern debates. When we argue about the ethics of AI or the future of democracy, we are still wrestling with the legacy of these two ancient worlds. It's the conversation that continues to shape our present, and it asks every one of us to decide, which code will we write for the future?